een lezing geven over, dan moet ik even spieken, de dualiteit van de positie van de Braziliaanse vrouw. Laura is geboren in Sao Paulo, dus wederom Brazilië. En sociologe, ze heeft aan UvA gestudeerd, gender, seksualiteit en politiek. En momenteel doet ze de master in urban studies. En wat ik las en wel interessant vond, was dat ze gefascineerd is door de manier waarop migranten hun identiteit vormgeven binnen hun politieke context. Nou, misschien komt het zo meteen nog aan bod, maar ik ben benieuwd. Daarnaast heeft zij ook onderzoek gedaan naar de Braziliaanse au pairs in Nederland. Misschien komt dat ook nog aan bod. In ieder geval, we gaan zo meteen een korte lezing horen. En deze zal in het Engels zijn. En ik wil graag Laura uitnodigen.
Can you hear me okay? Well, I'm a sociologist, and I was actually asked to speak here today about the position of the Brazilian woman. And it's with really great honor that I stand before you. The organization of the play that you're about to see had someone else in mind. It's a good friend of mine who unfortunately couldn't be here. But I met Marcus last week, and I'm really grateful that I can tell you a little bit about what I call the incomplete emancipation of the Brazilian woman. Now, before we begin, I want to say two things. The first is that I'm a feminist, and I'm speaking to you today as a woman and as a Brazilian woman and feminist, and not only as a sociologist, which obviously has implications for what I'm about to tell you. The second thing is that I will be speaking from the perspective of an educated, middle-class Brazilian woman who grew up in Europe, so do keep that in mind. And this way, what I think this means is that I am both an insider and an outsider of the story that I'm going to tell you now. Women in Brazil live in a little bit of a paradox regarding female emancipation. We've booked a lot of success in areas such as the workplace and political representation, but we also deal with a lot of sexism and machismo in everyday life. We do have a woman for president, and this fact is not secondary in any way. From a purely political standpoint, you could say that only a society that is egalitarian and emancipated would welcome a woman in such a position. But I can assure you that the road to power was in no way a tale of open arms. So almost a decade ago in Brazil, we adopted a law that established that there should be a minimum of 30% women candidates for any political party. The policy was inspired a little bit on our neighbors, Argentina, and it came from an assumption that unless there were enough women in power, we would not be discussing women's interests. Now, I personally don't see women's rights as an interest of a political group. I think women are human beings, but maybe that's just me. But what we do see is research done in Argentina after their law passed shows that the most women-friendly laws are actually passed by women, so you see the importance of that there. Now, the political debate surrounding the quota of 30% was quite interesting. We saw Veja is a Brazilian weekly magazine. In 2006, around the time that this was under discussion, they came out, and I quote, they said, the law is unrealistic because the feminine interest in politics is smaller than that of men. Now, bam, national media literally coming out and saying that women don't care about politics and somehow women don't belong there. So fast forward to 2010 and we have a woman for candidate of presidency, which, you know, progress, great. But like I said, she endured a very sexist battle to get to that position. Dilma was dismissed for being too uncharismatic, unattractive, unfriendly, unfeminine, pompous, inexperienced, and a lot of other undesirable qualities for a presidential candidate, but more than anything for a woman. Inexperience was kind of an interesting claim because Dilma had been a minister of energy affairs in Brazil and also the chief of staff from the previous administration, and her expertise and solid background had been seen as very strong points until she became a figure that was, you know, competing for a very prominent position, and those actually became points of criticism. People saw that she was unapproachable, she spoke in a very pretentious language, and they started talking about her teeth and her hair and the shape of the glasses that she wore and the clothing that she wore and the faces that she pulled while speaking in public, and her main points and actual message were being dismissed based on her appearance, and it does make you wonder whether that would have been the case for a male candidate to that extent. Now, what really seemed to bother people in, you know, as far as public debate was concerned, is that she was showing too much of her intellectual harsh side and not coming off as enough of a woman. Now, she really started to make conscious efforts to give in to some sort of norm about what women are. She changed her hair and dropped the glasses and whitened her teeth and started wearing more form-fitting clothing and started speaking in terms of being the mother of this or the mother of that. Very, very feminine indeed. But, I mean, this is not... Look, I'm not trying to take away from the merit of us having a woman as the president of Brazil, but it is a bit sad to me that in order to become president in a sexist society, she had to become more feminine and succumb to some sort of norm about a gender stereotype. Now, there are some other really key questions in understanding the duality of the position of women in Brazil. What we're seeing now, which is really great, is that Brazil is building up a welfare state, and this is having really remarkable consequences for women living in small, impoverished, or working-class communities. In the state of Piauí, which is a small state in the northeast of Brazil, one anthropologist recently wrote that there's a little bit of a feminist revolution going on there because women are being given welfare paychecks that would otherwise be given to men, and it's having a really empowering effect, not only in their consumption patterns, so they're buying things like lipstick or treats for their children as opposed to whatever else because they finally have control over this, but also it's giving them the upper hand economically and a structural income, which means that for the first time in history we're starting to see women leaving abusive marriages in a very sexist part of the country. So the unintended consequences of this new Brazil are really amazing for women. Another thing that I think we really need to acknowledge when discussing the position of women in Brazil is that Brazil is a religious place, and the same conservatism that dictates that women should be something like soft-spoken or beautiful is also politically powerful, to the point of restricting any talk about abortion laws or keeping conversations about equal pay rights basically non-existent in national politics. Now, the question of unrealistic beauty ideals is also really important, and if I'm honest, I could probably have done the entire lecture about that because it's really that important. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the time to explain that to the extent that maybe I would have liked to, but the one thing that I can say is that Brazilian society is quite fixated with physical appearance. Our cosmetic surgery industry is huge and possibly one of the biggest in the world. In popular culture, I mean, it might even be hard to explain to anyone that doesn't know Brazil very well, but we have quite a large amount of celebrities that are known basically because of their butts. And I mean, you know, for me that really shows the bizarre side of this obsession, because we have women who are named after the fruit that most resembles the shape of their butts. And so we have the watermelon lady and the pear woman, or whatever they call. And the thing is that the same culture that objectifies women to the point of, you know, them being famous because of their ass, creates an environment that's a little bit hostile to your average woman. It's quite sexist, and it normalizes verbal harassment on the streets. So Brazilian women walking around can pretty much count on a significant amount of comments on their appearance. And what it also does is that it sexualizes women from a very young age. When I think of my generation, I'm 25 now, and we were dancing to very obscene lyrics about women's bodies before we even had our first kiss, you know, at little kids' birthday parties at 8 years old. So I guess that in the little time that I had to come and tell you something about the position of women in Brazil, what I really want to put forth is the complex and contradictory nature of what I call this incomplete emancipation. And I also wanted to highlight how in the Netherlands the process is the reverse, whereby cultural emancipation has been a little bit more successful in terms of breaking with traditional patterns about what women are supposed to be, but economically and politically, Dutch women also have a lot of work to do. So in light of the International Women's Day, which was last Friday, I really wanted to say that the position of women has improved a lot, probably in a lot of the countries, you know, around the world, but and obviously this happened very much thanks to the first feminist wave, but you know, it's not over. We still have a lot to do, and that applies for everywhere. It's important not to forget that. Thank you very much.